The Sniper, a black-pilled internet loser story. I ran away from my home at the age of 24 and am now living in a small two-person tent in a local park known for its 5-mile walking trail. I set up my tent rather close to the trail, but in such a way that it was difficult to spot. I surrounded it with a good amount of branches, so someone would have to get really close to find my tent. I felt isolated, but not too isolated. Close enough to hear the voices of people passing by, but not close enough to make out what they were saying. I would spend my days walking, thinking, drawing, and writing in a notebook, and sometimes going to the grocery store to get some food. I mostly got granola, tuna cans, raisins, bread, that kind of thing. I bought food that was on sale and didn't need to be refrigerated. Sometimes I would treat myself to some rotisserie chicken. It was surprisingly cheap, and the warm 3 invigorated me. I would buy water and put in packets of electrolytes for extra energy. Some days I would just drink water without eating. That was how I spent my days. Why did I run away from home? I guess there were 2 reasons, maybe 3. First, I got tired of my parents. Actually, tired is an understatement, more like I started to despise them to the point of making evil plans in my mind. My father had anger issues and was often in a bad mood. I guess you could be around him if he was in a good mood, but that was rare. He was volatile. He could be friendly, but then you say one wrong thing and he would explode. It was unpredictable, and I didn't like walking on eggshells all the time just to make one mistake and unleash his wrath. He would always get on my case about going to college or getting a better job. He was all about climbing up the corporate ladder. He worked in IT and he kept wanting me to read computer books and get some certification, but I never did. I worked various odd jobs and saved up a good amount, good enough for me, but not for him. He also never taught me anything. He was one of those guys who may ask you to do something, but then when you didn't do it his way, he would just say, "Never mind, just go. I'll do it myself." He never let me make mistakes and learn. As a result, I'm a totally useless 24-year-old. And that ties into the second reason I ran away. To do something on my own for once in my life. I was an internet-addicted loser, and one day I just couldn't take it anymore. So I jumped from one extreme to the other, from spending all day in a dark room, browsing the darkest parts of the internet, to spending all day outdoors in the sun. I adapted pretty quickly, and I learned to enjoy the simplicity of tent life. I wasn't in the middle of nowhere. The place I had chosen was close to stores, so I could always get food and water. There was also a hospital nearby. The hobo life was surprisingly enjoyable. I forgot all about politics and internet drama, worrying about cooking food, visiting relatives, taxes, bills, family issues. It all faded away. This ties into the third reason I ran away. My mother. She was all about keeping up appearances. She would always get on my case about taking showers, buying new clothes, not wearing sweatpants when we go out, always going out to restaurants and spending ludicrous amounts of money. She would always drag me to the houses of relatives and friends. I hated it, for good and for bad reasons. For bad reasons, because I would be away from video games and the internet. For good reasons, because they were vain people with not a lot of intelligence. I used to be a pretentious teenager who thought he was better than everyone else. I wanted to get rid of that attitude. I wanted to purge myself of my faults. Months went by. I was used to life in a tent, but I got bored. I found a shady guy who offered to sell me a sniper rifle for $1,600. I don't really get it. For that kind of money, you could buy a cheap car. That car has much more value and usability than a rifle. You can live inside a car, drive far away, haul groceries and many other things, transport a family. So many things you could do with a car that you can't do with a gun. What is a rifle? It's some plastic with some metal attached. How could that be worth the same as a car with all its complex moving parts and an engine and all the seats and wires and everything? How could a rifle be worth the same as a car? I don't get it at all. But I paid the $1,600 and acquired the rifle. It was the real deal. A military-grade, death-dealing machine. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud to own. It was a sniper rifle that any assassin would be proud I felt so cool just holding it in my hands. The feeling of power was intoxicating when I first grabbed it and walked around in the forest, in an area where people don't really go. I was careful. I didn't want to get spotted right after spending so much money. I did all sorts of poses with it, pretending to be some soldier or assassin. Even though I was so depressed earlier, I now felt like a little kid again. I wondered why a gun made me feel so childlike. Why was there such a close correlation between children and guns? One day when I was a ways off from people, I saw a squirrel and decided to try shooting it. The rifle was silent so there wouldn't be any noise. The squirrel was rummaging in some leaves. I crouched quietly, aimed the gun at it, peered through the scope, lined up my shot, and pulled the trigger. Miss. There was a small explosion of dirt and some of the leaves flew up. The squirrel panicked and ran away. I had an intense feeling of guilt. Why did I decide to do that? I wasn't even hungry or trying to hunt it. I just wanted to test out my gun. I knew that killing people was wrong, but now that I think about it, I don't know where I learned it from. I know it definitely wasn't from my father and mother. They didn't teach me anything. I guess some movie or video game had a character who never killed anyone, but I don't know. This fact disturbed me, that something that was supposedly so evil was never condemned by anyone around me. I guess my parents and everyone else just assume that their children know these things or will eventually learn them. But from who? This evil thought repeated through my mind over and over. Nobody taught me anything. Nobody taught me anything. Nobody taught me anything. I didn't know my left from my right. I didn't know right from wrong. I could do anything for any reason and not even know why I did it. I silently grieved for my condition. I guess that's reason number 4 for why I'm out here. I don't trust myself around other people. Being out here made me feel distant to them, and I like the distance between society. Despite being hot during the summer and cold during the winter, I loved living on my own time and setting my own schedule. And I realized once you unplug from society, there's not much to worry about. 2 years passed since I first ran away. I slept in and left my tent a little later than usual. I was slowly making my way down the trail, taking my time to observe the ground, the rocks, the sticks, the mushrooms. I don't know why. Maybe I was a little more contemplative that day. The park was usually quite busy, but it was currently winter and there were fewer people than usual. I bent down to look at something on the ground, some interesting pattern. I heard some people a few dozen meters behind me on the trail. I turned around, only to see my father and mother walking down the trail. They were walking together. They seemed to be having a friendly conversation. They glanced at me, but they didn't recognize me with my beard and different clothing from usual. It also helped that I wasn't close to them or fully turned towards them. I quickly got up and started to walk down the trail in the same direction that they were going, keeping ahead of them by 10 to 15 seconds. The trail was quite hilly, and as soon as I got over a hill and was out of sight of them, I sprinted to the left of the trail and ran until I was a good distance off the trail, but still close enough that I could make out who was walking on the trail. I waited in anticipation. Then, I saw my parents continue to walk down the trail, past the point where I had run off, and they just kept going, not even noticing that I was watching them, and not even knowing who they had just seen. The feeling that I had eluded them and was secretly watching them was intoxicating. It felt powerful, sneaky, like some super slick spy. The fact that I was some dumb man-child running around the woods left my mind, maybe because of the adrenaline rush. And that's when it hit me. Why I got my sniper rifle and got revenge for what they had done to me. I could do it. Right now. It would be easy. Just aim and pull the trigger. And boom, I would have my revenge. I would feel better, right? All my problems would be solved? Before I had time to think, I ran towards my tent. It was just a few minutes away. I didn't keep my rifle in the tent because if someone did find my tent, I didn't want to be arrested for having the rifle, and I didn't want the rifle to be stolen. Instead, I kept the rifle in a waterproof bag a little ways from the tent, with some leaves and branches on top of it. In fact, someone could just walk over the rifle and not even know it was there. I moved the branches and swept away the leaves and grabbed the bag with the rifle. I took the rifle out, my heart racing with fear and excitement, and I ran back to the trail. The trail had all sorts of shortcuts and detours that I had mastered in my 2 years. I knew it like the back of my hand. I used my knowledge to skip parts of the trail and ended up ahead of my parents. I kept the rifle partially hidden under my lodge jacket. I was on alert. I would see anyone before they saw me, and I could duck into the forest to bypass them. I didn't see anyone else on the trail. I kept running until I found a good vantage point where I could see a good amount of the trail. I laid down on the cold, damp ground and set up my rifle in shooting position. I didn't care that the ground was still wet from melted snow. I looked through the scope, made some small adjustments, and waited for my parents to show up. Time passed by. Every minute was like an hour. Memories were rushing through my mind. It wasn't all bad, but then again, I had no frame of reference. I didn't know anything. I didn't understand anything. I didn't even know what I was thinking. Then I saw 2 figures walking out of a dense line of trees. There was my parents. I looked at them through my scope. They seemed to be having a lively conversation. They seemed different from what I remember 2 years ago. Why? Had they changed? Had I changed? Lit up thinking further, aimed directly at my father's chest. Bang. And I hit my mother. Bang. But my finger did not pull the trigger. No bullets left the gun. There was no recoil. I had not fired the gun. My father and mother still lived, and they still continued to merrily walk down the trail in the park. My hands were shaking. In a frenzy, I tore off the scope and threw the rifle a few meters behind me. I felt like I just ripped the teeth out of a lion. Many thoughts raced through my mind, not the least of which was that I had almost become a murderer, to my own parents even. I continued observing my parents through the scope. They were none the wiser. Nobody knew what had just happened. Nobody except me and God. Even though I considered myself an agnostic through most of my life, I now felt some kind of closeness to God that I never had before. I felt that God had done something that my father on earth never did. Approve of a good decision I had made. The man that I was looking at through the scope never did something like that. He could never bring himself to ever compliment me. I never did anything right. But was that the truth? Or was that the truth he had implanted into me? Was it true that I had never done anything good in my life? Not even once? Well, even if it was true, I now proved him wrong. I had done something right. I saved someone from dying, even if it was from my own hands. My earthly father messed me up a lot. He made me hate myself. And then I also started to hate him. And then I hated the world. I came to live in a tent in a park because I wanted to toughen myself up, prove that I was strong and not just a worthless waste of life. I wanted to accomplish something difficult. But this experience made me realize what true strength was. True strength isn't about killing anyone. In fact, killing someone was quite easy. All you needed was a gun or a knife, or even a rock. Killing someone's the easy way out. No, the difficult thing that many people failed at was forgiving someone. And not killing their body, but killing the evil influence they had on you. From my parents, I learned to be angry and resentful. I learned to hate. I learned vanity. I learned wastefulness. I learned apathy. Killing them would accomplish nothing except my destruction. But killing them in my mind, that was where it really counted. I realized the final battle was in the mind, and it was in fact the most difficult battle with the highest stakes. I lied there in the cold for hours, just thinking. I imagined my mother scolding me and telling me I was going to get sick from lying down on the ground. I guess my mother did care about me a little bit. And then my father would come over and cheer me up, telling me that getting dirty was just what boys did. I guess he tried to love me. in his own way. Yeah, my parents tried, but they kind of failed in raising me. But hating them won't change anything. I'm an adult now, or at least I should be. I'm nowhere near as good as I should be, but I hope. I pray it's not too late to change. I have to take my life into my own hands, or at least trust in God to guide me. It seems like God takes over when our earthly parents drop the ball. I guess God is the eternal Father. It seems that when life hangs in the balance, a man starts to think about deeper things. Having the power to end life gets me thinking about the fragility and value of life. Life is precious, and I'll never try to take it ever again. I took the rifle, put it in a bag, put a heavy rock in it, tied it up nice and tight, and threw it into the middle of a lake. So much for childhood fantasies and false notions of manhood. I think I'll keep living out here in a tent, and maybe when I finally manage to gain some wisdom, I'll visit my folks again. Maybe they'll be receptive. Or maybe they'll call me a fool. Maybe I am a fool. But I'd rather be God's fool than the world's fool. Thank you for listening to my story. Peace be with you.